Hey everyone, welcome to Reddit Readout. Today we are checking out People of Reddit. Story 1. Helicopter Landlord. Helicopter Landlord. I, M21 at the time, was living with my parents. My mental health was not great and I used self-harm as a coping mechanism. I once went too far and needing to go to the ER. Fast forward a few months. I hadn't cut since, but my parents and my sister were going to Europe for a month. I didn't super love the idea of being home alone for an extended period of time while I was still working on myself. I cleared with my parents and essentially had 3 friends move in for the month. Even before my parents were gone, my friends often used my house for gatherings. This made it even easier. These gatherings were not parties or raves, mind you. It typically involved a bunch of nerds like playing board games. My parents have a great relationship with their landlord. He loves the house and is always happy to do work on it. At the beginning of the month I explained to him I had a few friends staying with me and he explained to me that he'd be around a lot. To take advantage of my parents being gone, no problem. One night we had around 4 other friends also spend the night. I had to work at 6 AM, so I left my friends sleeping in the living room. The last 2 there are cleaning up and getting ready to leave when the landlord comes in with a plumber and starts working on the bathroom. He starts talking with the plumber. Oh, it's a great family, never had issues, things like that. Then he gets to me, but they have a lazy son who won't get his own place. He's here alone this month and he's having parties every day. He never cleans anything. My room does have a tendency to get cluttered, but that's it. It goes like this while my friends keep cleaning. These friends are 2 of my biggest supporters in breaking the self-harm behavior. My friend Paul then begins marching past the bathroom. The landlord then says, "Now who are you and why are you in my house without a resident?" He responds in the most passive-aggressive, petty, obnoxious tone ever, saying, "Oh, I'm sorry, I'm Paul. You see, I was asked to stay with my friend for a few weeks while his parents are gone. You see, he's been really struggling with self-harm and is scared that if he's here by himself for too long he might end up in the hospital again. Sorry for any inconvenience we cause." He then did not wait for a response and paraded his way out. The landlord has been much kinder to me in the 5 years since, LOL. Story 2. Wife thinks I'm taking longer than I need in the bathroom, so I make sure she knows it's legit. My wife and I bought our first house shortly after our wedding. Everything went smoothly and we enjoyed our time as newlyweds. Of course, as the honeymoon phase began to fade, some minor issues started to emerge. For her, the first one was the typical guy on the toilet problem. So, sometimes I spend quite a bit of time on the toilet. It's all legit though. I'm not just scrolling on my phone. I mean, I also do that, but I'm also doing what I'm supposed to be doing as well. Anyways, my wife started to pick up on how long I was spending in the bathroom and commenting on it. This was exacerbated with some unlucky incidences of her asking when I was coming out just as I was standing up and about to flush the toilet, so it seemed like I was just standing there until she said something and flushing to fake like I just finished. For context, I eat a lot. I usually eat about 3,000 calories a day, give or take a few hundred, and I'm a thin frame guy, 160 pounds, 72 kilograms, give or take, and about 6'5". Back then I was still getting used to the bowel movements associated with eating that much, and they tended to come at random times in varying amounts. My wife, though, didn't believe me. Her diet was much less structured than mine and she had no notion of what was going on in that room for so long. This culminated in a few arguments with her, accusing me of wasting time in the bathroom on my phone and myself insisting that I was indeed pooping. They were mostly joke arguments, but I really wasn't wasting time and was actually a little offended that she wouldn't believe me. So I decided I would get a little revenge and clear my name in the process. So the next time I was in the bathroom and my wife was in earshot, I began loudly announcing the following at the appropriate intervals: "Poop is currently exiting my butthole," shortly followed by "Poop has finished exiting my butthole." I would do this 2 or 3 times for however long I was in the bathroom, during which I would be met with laughter or groaning from the other room depending on how many times I had made my announcement that session. After a few days of this she would get grossed out and say okay I get it, and I would stop. Since then I have developed a much more predictable poop schedule, but I no longer get questioned as to my goings-on in the bathroom behind closed doors. Story 3. How I got my old boss fired after he fired me. Jump to week 4 for the main event. If backstories aren't your vibe, I got hired as a veterinary assistant at an animal shelter, which was a huge accomplishment for me. I spent many years interning for free at an exotic animal rehab center and working $10/HR at a sanctuary that had a lot of animals who needed daily medical care, to eventually get a decent paying job in animal welfare. I used to volunteer for this shelter too, so I really thought I hit the jackpot with this job. Week 1, fantastic. My manager, we'll call her asshole, was training me. She frequently told me how impressed she was at my ability to handle animals with ease. And even a few staff members told me they haven't seen someone so new be able to keep up at their high pace. The only red flag was seeing a staff picture with a bunch of X's over a lot of their faces, but I was just so happy and proud to be working there that this didn't even register as a red flag until I got fired. Week 2, asshole passed my training to the 2 licensed vet techs to take turns training me. We'll call one bitch, and the other one cunt. Bitch immediately radiated mean girl energy with her superiority complex, but I played ball since I was already used to it. The 2 other places I worked at before were super unprofessional and cliquey, gossiping a lot, especially my internship. It was still weird though, considering the 2 other places were mostly people my age, early/mid-20s, yet bitch and cunt were well into their 40s and still acting this way. When bitch was training she hardly even trained at all, she'd ignore me while doing computer stuff and left me to do everything. Which was fine. I wanted to be doing the stuff with the animals, but anytime I'd ask a question she would roll her eyes and say you should ask the veterinarian, and just made you feel bad about yourself for trying to get involved. When cunt was training me, it was just some next level micromanaging shit. I'm talking about literally hovering over my shoulder as I'm drawing out vaccines and doing blood tests. It was quite distracting, and cunt often got frustrated with me. Probably she had nothing to correct me on. I tried to be nice and make small talk with her, but she didn't acknowledge anything I said, so I eventually gave up and stopped talking altogether. Week 3, the staff's attitude towards me took a complete 180. Everyone would go silent and stare as I walked past. It was super bizarre. I would go and try to do my responsibilities, but bitch would stop me and have me do something else, like fold towels or mop another room. I didn't see an issue with it until by the end of my shift I realized all I had done was grunt work. Maybe it was an off day, but this happened for the next 3 days. Along with straight up bullying. I remember bitch whispering to 2 other assistants just loud enough for me to hear, you look at her nails, and she doesn't even have a band-aid? That's hygienic, followed by laugher. I have anxiety and pick at my nails, sometimes until they bleed a little. So I immediately started wearing band-aids, that often needed to be replaced since I was doing the dishes and wiping off tables, etc. They mocked my toe walking, I'm autistic, and talked about how weird my feet were, made fun of me for drinking an oil pop because does she really need digestive support too? Gross. I just like the root beer flavor, frequently called me annoying, and just a ton of Regina George shit like that. All of the bullying was within earshot too as I was doing the grunt work, holding back tears for hours every day. It felt like a humiliation ritual. Week 4, this is where it gets juicy. There was a staff meeting, which means there were no appointments for the first half of the day, and after the meeting ended everyone was just sitting around and talking. Not to me, of course, I was completely alienated. The clinic head, we'll call him dumbass, eventually walks into the clinic and says, "Hey Cherry Page, can you come into my office so we can talk about your performance?" In front of everyone. All eyes were on me as we walked into his office. He left the door wide open, sat me down and said, "Based on your performance report, it seems that, you have the right attitude and energy, but you just aren't quite catching on." I pushed back saying I was drawing up vaccines, giving vaccines, doing blood tests, filling prescriptions, entering patients' info into the computer system, checking patients in and out of the clinic, animal restraint, then asked what I wasn't catching on to. He stuttered for a moment and said, "Well, you know you're asking too many questions, you keep leaving without telling anyone, and have been way too fidgety around the patients." My eyes immediately welled up, and I asked to shut the door. Dumbass said of course. After shutting it I told him that I was autistic, bipolar, and have extremely bad anxiety. His eyes went wide and looked down as he said, "Oh." There was a long pause, so I sat back down, then he continued saying, "Well, this changes everything. This was originally going to be a more stern talk, but how can we accommodate you?" I explained that I was only leaving to replace my band-aids as needed, and apologized for not telling anyone. It was less than 30 seconds to grab one, which is why I didn't inform anyone, then promised to do so from now on. And said all I needed was hands-on training, which I thought was basic training, but W.E. Dumbass ended the conversation with, "I will need to tell HR, asshole, and dick, other manager, since they are on a need-to-know basis, but I promise you we will treat you with the utmost respect, Shurei." I walked out of the office in tears, and there was bitch, waiting outside. She laughed at me while saying, "Hi Cherry Page." I still smiled and said hi. When I got back in the clinic nobody would even look at me. The last 4 hours was pure humiliation, there wasn't even grunt work to do. I was literally just standing there. I wanted to ask to go home early but was too scared to, and basically spent the rest of my shift going in and out of the bathroom having panic attacks every 10 to 15 minutes. Longest 4 hours ever. Next day, asshole was now training me again, and I was actually able to do stuff that wasn't cleaning. The staff was still being super weird, which just fueled my anxiety and made it extremely hard to focus. During my lunch break I went to Dumbass's office to speak to him privately. I started to cry, telling him how everyone was just staring at me as if I were a ghost, and felt like I was being judged. "Dumbass, I think I know what's going on, you see. There is this worry that you might not work out, but I can assure you that nobody is judging you. We want you to succeed." Still crying, I asked him if there was anything he could do. Admittedly, I'm not sure what he could have done, but anything is better than what he actually did. Dumbass looked me straight in my crying eyes and said, "Well Cherry Page, you might not make a good tech." Notice how he started calling me a tech even though my title was assistant, just to fuck with my head more. My jaw literally dropped, then he said, "I don't know what to tell you, just go out there and kick ass." I left his office completely dumbfounded, and at the end of my shift I asked asshole what my strong points were and what I needed to improve on. All she said was, "Well, things will either stay the same or get better. You're done with your shift so you can go home now." I went home crying again and was actually starting to doubt my abilities, until I looked at the Glassdoor and Indeed reviews for this place. At least half were the exact same stories: bullied by the techs, reprehended for frivolous reasons, fired for the same reasons, and that your ability to succeed has nothing to do with skill and everything to do with who likes you. I knew right then and there I needed to start a paper trail, but didn't know how or where to start. However, they gave me a great start by having Dick text me a little after 11 p.m. with an updated schedule that had me working the next 6 consecutive days in a row. In the interview we specifically agreed to me working no more than 4 days a week BC of school and the fact I couldn't afford more than 4 Uber rides a week. I immediately emailed Dumbass and told him, due to my frequent panic attacks and crying spells from our disciplinary talk, that I would not be able to make it into work tomorrow, and thanked him for the accommodation. He emailed me less than 15 minutes later and said, "I hope you feel better soon, let me know when you're ready to come back into work." It wasn't even a lie, I was a total mess. I had already worked 4 days that week, so the next day I emailed Dumbass saying basically the same thing. He emailed me back saying that I could take as much time off as I needed, and to let him know when I'm ready to come back into work. He knew I had him by the balls at that point. Around 3 p.m. that same day, HR emailed me saying, "I know it's your day off, but we need to schedule a call to chat tomorrow." I knew exactly what was gonna happen and told him I'd call him at 4:30 p.m. so he could sweat all day at work. Next day at 4:30 p.m., I called HR right on the dot, and he told me there have been some red flags, so I asked him to elaborate. He stuttered and said, well, you know. The stuff dumbass talked to you about in his office. I told him that we spoke about my disabilities and not my performance. HR was speechless. You could hear him holding his breath as I explained how the conversation went. He was like a malfunctioning robot, repeating the same "Your termination is effective immediately, I will send you an email confirmation." I kept pushing back and demanding more specific reasons, then said, name one thing I've done wrong. HR just hung up on me. They basically handed me a lawsuit, but I still fell into a deep depression. In 2018 I was 5150D and put into the ICU wing of the psych ward, if that gives you an idea how bad my bipolar disorder can get. I had worked so many years on my mental health and gaining work experience, and I actually thought I made it in life for second. Not only were my dreams crushed, but my self-esteem as well. Luckily you have 180 days to file a complaint with the EEOC. Around day 150 I finally got off my ass and found an attorney to take my case on contingency. The complaint was filed at I think day 165 or something like that. I waited long enough for them to feel safe. BC clearly they knew they could get sued. I gave HR the kiss of death with my late night email asking for a copy of my most recent pay stub. They wanted to mediate, which I was open to, and HR is such a fucking idiot. He was late to mediation and the CFO was pissed lol. Their offer was insulting, $700. I obviously declined and we continued the EEOC process. It took well over a year before I was finally able to issue a NRTS in early June of this year. By the end of the month we reached a 5-figure settlement that was around 3-5x their original offer at mediation. It's taxed and I paid the contingency fees back. But this was never about $, it was about my dignity. Plus since I've been focusing on my mental health and getting my degree, I'm definitely not rich by any means, so the leftover $, can still wipe a few tears lol. The main reason I wrote this is BC a few nights ago I checked their website to see if anyone actually got fired, and to my surprise dumbass wasn't on their website anymore. Just to confirm I looked at his LinkedIn, and his employment there ended in June 2023. The month I issued the NRTS. Now it says he's currently a self-employed instructor at consulting firm business, whatever that is LMFAO. Sure, when people leave a job they make a post on their LinkedIn about how they're leaving on good terms blah blah. Dumbass hasn't posted anything in over a month, which tells me they did not leave on good terms ha. I was so pumped, man. This was way more validating than the settlement check. HR was guilty AF too, but dumbass was the one who watched and enabled the bullying, looked me straight in my crying eyes saying, well Cherry Page, you might not make a good tech. Well dumbass, you might not make a good clinic head. TLDR, got my dream job just to be bullied by my co-workers, all the managers were in on it. I was so good at the job that the only mistakes were related to my disabilities. Threw a curveball by telling them that. Lots of humiliation, but kept a paper trail of their discriminatory actions. Ended with a nice settlement check and got the man who enabled the toxicity in the clinic fired. That's all for today. Please don't forget to like and subscribe.